Welcome back everyone. The Google Pixel 4 came out a couple years ago back in 2019, and I just got done talking about the Google Pixel 4 XL, and what I can tell you is this whole entire lineup of the Pixel 4 was very interesting because on one hand you had the Pixel 4 and 4 XL, which I think were very weird devices that Google made, but then you had the Google Pixel 4a that came out a long time after this device, and I think that was a really good iPhone. But here's a very important thing that is still relevant to today. Just because a phone is $1,000 phone or it's a $900 or $800 or $700 phone, the device itself is what's important for the price tag. If you have, the best iPhone, let's say a Google Pixel, 6 Pro for example, if that was a $5,000 phone, that wouldn't be a good deal at all. That'd be a horrible deal. If that phone was $300, that would be a really good deal for that iPhone, and that would be an amazing phone. We would be wondering how they made a phone for that price tag. So I hope you understand, value per dollar and everything like that. The Pixel 4a, even though it was pretty much a worse phone than the Pixel 4, it was substantially cheaper than the Google Pixel 4. So because of that, you were getting a phone that, it didn't look as good, didn't feel as good, but on one hand, it did look a little bit better because it had a hole punch display and everything. So hopefully you kind of understand where I'm going through with this specific, review. With the Pixel 4, it wasn't a flop, but I do think Google just did some really weird things with this device that they eventually fixed with the Pixel 5, and now if they can kind of get the stability issues fixed with the Pixel 6 and 6 Pro, I think they'll have a hit on their hands for sure. Now, like I mentioned, this phone came out in 2019, and on the front, you did have a very, interesting design. So a 5.7-inch OLED display. It was 1080p, so full HD, which was really cool. Now, they did go from that notch on the Pixel 3 XL to this type of design for both models, and I did actually prefer this design a lot more than the Pixel 3 XL, so that was a huge upgrade, and I did like having 90 Hz. In 2019, most of the phones were still doing 90 Hz. There were a few that were doing, the Galaxy S10 was still doing 60 Hz, but you did have the OnePlus 7 Pro and the OnePlus 7T Pro that did 90 Hz, which was really cool, so I did like having that type of capability on this type of device. Now, we did have the USB Type-C port on the bottom, which was really cool, and on the sides, we had the, kind of like a aluminum chassis on this phone, which felt really, really good. And on the back, we had a couple of different backs. So the orange one that I had actually had like this kind of matte texture on top of the glass, which felt really nice. I actually like that a lot. With this black model, and I think another model that I had, it's pretty much just glass, so it feels exactly like a glass back. But with this one, for the orange one I had, that one was a really good feeling back, and I actually do miss that type of texture. And now feeling the phone in the hand, it still feels like a very premium phone. It does not feel cheap or anything like that. We had that dual camera setup on the back as well. We had IP certification. We had wireless charging as well, which was really cool. And all in all, on the outside, it was actually a pretty interesting phone. I actually did like the way this phone kind of performed, at least on the outside, and I think it was a good looking phone. It definitely was not an ugly looking phone, but it's not until we start getting into the camera setup where things start kind of weirding me out. Now, even back in 2019, we had phones like the Galaxy S10 and the iPhone 11 Pros, and even the iPhone 11, they all had, dual camera setups, all had ultra-wide sensors, all had a lot of capability within the camera, and all can do 4K at 60 on the front and the back. With the Pixel 4 and just the Pixel lineup in general, Google was known for their cameras. With the original Pixel, and even with the Pixel 2 and 2 XL, those are rated as some of the highest performing or best performing cameras of those years. Now with the Pixel 4, on the other hand, we had a dual camera setup, a 12.2 megapixel wide, and a 16 megapixel telephoto lens. And the problem with this specific camera was that even Google during their keynote, they kind of bashed the ultra-wide sensor, which was kind of weird, and then they eventually brought it back with the next model, which was very, very strange, but they didn't give us 4K at 60. This was one of, I think, the biggest problems with the Pixel 4 at that time, and even now, no 4K at 60 on the back is very, very weird, and they eventually brought it in with the next model, like I mentioned, but this was a flagship, and you were competing with other phones. The Galaxy S20, like 4 months after this, could do like 8K, so it was pretty crazy that this phone couldn't even do 4K at 60. On the front, you had an 8 megapixel wide-angle lens, and again, only 1080p on the front, no 4K at 60 on the front either, and it really didn't make any sense why Google chose this direction. When you looked at the competition, they were running circles around, this specific phone. Before, Google was very slow to adapt, any extra sensors, and then when they did a telephoto lens, It was very weird. I never really understood that, and the camera was probably one of the biggest downfalls of this specific phone. There were some other areas here and there, but I wasn't a fan of that at all, and that was something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So in terms of the camera, I'm sure it's still good, but it's really not that great compared to the competition of that year. Now, a really good thing about the Google Pixel 4, kind of switching ways, is with the software. I love the software of the Pixel lineup. Stock software is really good, and the thing about the Pixel 4 is that it's going to be supported for many years to come. Even when it's not supported with software anymore via, actual, full-on OS updates, you are still going to be getting quite a bit of custom ROM support on this type of device too. Now, why is that important? Well, pretty much if you want a phone that's going to last you the longest amount of time, going with something like a Google Pixel that's going to have probably a custom ROM community behind it will keep your phone supported for quite a bit of time, even out of, stock software support, which I think is really good. So if you're somebody who wants to get a phone and, be able to tinker around with it, well, the Google Pixel lineup is definitely a solid option for you. Now, in terms of performance, this device had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 855 chipset inside of it, an octa-core CPU with 2 different models, and this is another thing that kind of threw me off. Both models had 6 gigs of RAM, so that was a good amount of RAM to have on these types of phones. But the problem with the Google Pixel 4 was that it started off at 64 gigabytes of storage and it tapped out at 128 gigabytes of storage. So Google, for some reason, they don't want to give us a lot of storage on their phones, and it was these types of storage models, I think, since the original Pixel. So from the original Pixel to this one, they didn't even increase the storage models, which was very strange. I don't know why they did that. They did that just for so long. I don't know why they knew. It just made no sense. They eventually fixed it, but I wish they added more storage models here too. But the performance side of things, in my opinion, was actually pretty good. I think this was a pretty good performing phone. Because it has stock Android, there's not a lot of processes and stuff sticking out in the background. So because of that, you're in a good position where some phones like this aren't really going to be requiring too many resources. So because of that, this phone's performance is going to still be pretty good. I think it's going to get a little slower with future updates, but I do think with the Google Pixel 4, you're in a good position where this type of phone is, having software support can easily, handle everything you throw at it for the most part. There's no 120 Hz, it's only 90 Hz, which is still good enough. So things still feel and perform pretty well. If you're trying to play games and stuff on it, that, Snapdragon 855 is still more than powerful. I have a lot of phones with that Snapdragon 855, including my OnePlus 7T Pro, OnePlus 7 Pro, and my Galaxy S10, S10e, and S10 Plus. And all those phones still perform very, very well as well. So realistically, the performance side of things isn't really going to be that big of a deal with this type of phone. And I'll definitely say it's more of a pro than a con in my opinion. Now, ending it off with the battery life, this thing has a 2,800 mAh battery inside of it, which was another kind of downside. It should have had over a 3,000 mAh battery, and for this one to have a smaller size battery like this one is pretty insane. It also brought a 90 Hz panel, so the panel itself required more power, and the fact that they put I think it was a smaller size battery than its predecessor or something like that, it just didn't make any sense to me at all either. And this is just another case in point of Google just kind of making some weird decisions. And to be honest though, when I look back at these phones and I look at, the Pixel lineup right now, I'm actually pretty happy of what Google was able to do. If they can just increase the stability of the newest Pixels, I think they will probably have a hit on their hands. But with something like the Pixel 4, I think their software is still pretty stable at this point when they first released, but it's very strange that the Google Pixel 4 was a phone that Google even released in the first place. I think in 2022, I think it's worth it, but I don't think if you get a good value on it, then by all means go for it. But if you have to spend more than $250 on it, I probably wouldn't recommend buying it. It doesn't really stand out to me in any way, and I would just probably recommend buying a Samsung Galaxy S10 over this phone. You can buy a Galaxy S10 for probably cheaper than this thing. So that's kind of how I would put it. If you have any thoughts or questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.